Are you ready to see somebody's need for speed? I can put our wings in the wind faster than you could ever believe. Are you ready to rock? Fun that don't ever stop. We are on a crash course of freedom that's running on as long as we want.
The License and Registration Show is brought to you by Wheelhouse Storage, luxury garage condos for all of your toys. Visit wheelhousestorage.com for more information. Now on to the show. Go, the right little light is red. No, it's good. Red is good.
Red means go, right?
Yeah, for some reason, red means go. All right, cool. Welcome, everybody, to the License and Registration Show. I am your host, Mike Rioux, and today I am joined by three amazing gentlemen, all from different areas of the automotive world. I'll let them kind of go around the table and let them introduce themselves and who they're affiliated with and what they do.
Yeah.
Everybody looks at Nick. There you go.
Okay, I'll go ahead and start. My name is Nick Williams. I've been working in the automotive industry, focusing in like digital media and such for the last 10 years. Born and raised in Jacksonville, Florida, and right now I work up in Allentown, Pennsylvania for the Historic Vehicle Association, which is a division of Hagerty. So yeah, that's what I've been doing.
Cool.
I guess I'll spring off of that. I am Cason Vogel. I have worked in the automotive industry now for about 4 or 5 years. And right now I work with Hagerty, live here in Jacksonville, Florida, and I am a Hagerty territory manager. So I'm kind of the guy for all things Hagerty, collector cars here in Florida, really everywhere from kind of central Florida all the way up to South Georgia. So
Cool.
I'm Malcolm Hogan. My daughter calls me a local celebrity, but I started the Cars and Coffee Show here in Jacksonville back in 2008, and I handed it over to my business partner, Chris Brewer, of course, works with the Concord Elegance, and which I'm a board member of as well. I run my own automotive site, automotiveaddicts.com, and started a private luxury lifestyle club here in Jacksonville called SAC Collective.
Very cool.
But yeah, I've been cracking at that for almost 20 years now for my automotive addicts journey. So
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, welcome, everybody. I'm glad you guys could make it out.
Thanks for having us.
Having a good time.
Yeah.
So, to get into things, I just kind of want to get a guide from everyone or kind of an insight into current automotive culture, kind of a pulse on where you think things are at, where it may be going, and how it compares to maybe where we were just 10, 20 years ago.
Sure. I can kick things off.
Go for it.
I mean, recently, with the big electric vehicle push, that's a big thing everybody's kind of concerned about and where that might go. And I think that's a huge topic to, spawn off things with just the automotive culture in itself. I know a lot of us guys are automotive enthusiasts. We don't want to see our engines go away, our V8s and all that horsepower, but it's another automotive golden age, we're living in. So, never before we had 800 horsepower monsters come out of the assembly line. You can buy in your dealership.
Definitely.
Showroom. But a lot of people say getting while the getting's good. Because that stuff might go away soon. So we'll see. I don't know. It's a huge push with the all these automakers. General Motors said they're gonna have 20 electric cars, I think, in the next 5 to 10 years. So that's a huge push. So it's a big change, I guess, we're going to be going through, but I don't see it happening right now. But the infrastructure is not there. You buy an electric car, where you're going to charge it, besides your home or maybe your office, but
Right.
otherwise, But it's still, you still see some amazing stuff. Koenigsegg just released a 1,700 horsepower electric car
With a 3-cylinder, 600 horsepower supplemental motor.
Mental,
So
absolutely mental.
some crazy stuff, but that's kind of what we have to look forward to for the electric world, So
it's funny that you mentioned that too. I came from Tesla. I worked for Tesla Motors for 3 years, and when he said, what's the state of the car culture? Where's it going? For some reason, I just didn't think electric at all. Really, where I guess I've kind of become trained to really focus in on things is the hobby more so than the industry. And where things are going with the hobby, it seems, is the millennial generation. Millennials 1980 to like 1996, kind of depending on who you're asking. So, the oldest millennial is almost 40 years old now.
Yeah.
And these people finally have some money. I mean, everybody's, always talks about how millennials don't have any money and the baby boomer generation has all the money. And,
Right.
we can argue about that all day long. But really, from what we've seen, from what Hagerty's seen, the millennial generation's here. And there's actually been a few articles that we've put out. The millennial generation is going to be all right. It's, we're collecting different things. And, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Cars like, Japanese cars are trending really up.
Yeah, that 80s and 90s nostalgia.
Oh, yeah. So, I think while new cars that enter the road are going to be electric increasingly so, the collector hobby, I don't see it going away anytime soon unless there's some kind of major, catastrophic incident when it comes to fuel or something along those lines.
Right.
I mean, who knows what will happen there. But I think the hobby's in safe hands right now.
Yeah. Well, and Nick, so speaking of the 80s and 90s nostalgia with millennials coming online, what are you seeing from like HVA's perspective when you look at like the collector's landscape 10 years ago, 20 years ago, where we saw, 50s and 60s, you saw like a real big push with muscle cars and things like that. I think for the most part, we've seen that peak, at least in my opinion, simply because that wasn't the poster car for the current generation that's getting into collectibles. But what are you guys saying?
Well, I've always thought just about everyone loves the car they grow up with. And so once cars reach about 30 years old, they get into that nostalgia factor. And one thing I always like to think is cars age out of their suck, in the way of putting it. There's a lot of cars that when they come out, people are like, oh, it's underpowered, it doesn't look as nice, and doesn't all this kind of stuff. But then certain cars, once they're associated with a certain time period, a certain era, as people grow up and get money, as Cason said, they start to get a new, like a second wind on people wanting that car, people loving this thing. There's so many cars that used to be rejects that now people are saying like, oh my goodness, it was an absolute gem. Like I got to get one. And then they rise to these astronomical values. So when it comes to a lot of what we're seeing online in my space, we typically work with mainly American cars, so we do still work with a lot of the muscle cars that you mentioned. But of course, like I always say, the Fast and Furious generation is growing up and they want to buy the 90s JDM cars. They want to buy what was really interesting when they were a kid and things that they saw. Whereas like, think nowadays, you don't see a terrible amount of enthusiasts when it comes to like brass era cars or steam powered cars. There's still some out there, but it's not as relevant. So it doesn't have as much of a place in the automotive world as much as it used to. So the cars are always going to transition and kind of grow with like what's going to be popular with who's around 40 to 50 years old and gets the money to relive their youth.
You bring up a good topic there with the brass era cars, the pre-war cars, these big things that the older generation grew up with, or maybe that they idolized, or kind of like a 70s muscle car. For me, I wasn't alive then, but I still see that cool factor because it was right there just a generation or so before me. What's going to be had with those? I was talking to somebody from RM Auctions a couple weeks back, and he's telling me that he's having to kind of reassure a lot of his customers where they're saying, oh, my Jaguar XK 120 should be worth this, and it's not worth that anymore. They're still valuable cars. But what he's having to assure them is, look, your car's not going to be, it's not ever going to be worthless. It might just not be worth as much. And I also have been actually challenging the older generation. I actually did a presentation for a car club recently where the topic was valuation, and what I decided to do is, instead of preaching to these older individuals about the values of 1950s cars and stuff they knew a lot about, instead, I took the angle of trying to educate them about the newer generation, what we see as valuable. And what I kind of did was said, guys, if you want us to be interested in these cars from the 30s, 50s, 60s, get us engaged with them. You can't take it out to Cars and Coffee, stand by it, smile, wax it, and then take it back home and put it in the garage and expect me to want to buy it. Show me why it's cool. I think it's cool, but I need to be shown why. Prove to me why it's such a cool car, why it deserves to kind of stand the test of time.
Yeah,
You know,
it's like if you.
I'm sorry. It's such an interesting dynamic right now of the automotive industry. You know, you think about what's old is new again to people. You know, people aren't, well, my generation, we're looking at some of the older stuff. It's like, wow, I can actually attain some of that now. The stuff that cost quite a bit back then when it was new. On the same hand, the millennials are looking at all this new stuff coming along, and also on that same page, the old stuff to them is new. So they're like, okay, I've never seen that before. I've never seen a 240Z, running around like that or in that kind of, good shape or whatever. But it's just an interesting time. So many pieces of the puzzle right now working, with and against each other,
But do you think things, so when we talk about engaging the newer generation with older vehicles, movies or in the media, something like Ford versus Ferrari that just came out,
Sure.
is that helping establish or at least gain some interest by
absolutely.
the newer generation in something that's considered historical or heritage?
I would definitely say so. And one thing I've always said is if you don't have access to the hobby, you can't build the passion. So people need to be able to actually get access to these cars, be able to see what they're like. And one of the things that seems to be gaining a ton of popularity for our generation is like vaporwave and like kind of like 1980s Miami aesthetic. So there's a ton of stuff out there of like, like car configuration stuff of like 80s cars have been modded, and then they like throw them in like music videos for like EDM things. And then because of that, people are like, oh my goodness, I love a 512 Testarossa, or I love a Countach, because they love that throwback look and that aesthetic that comes with it. And then who knows from there if they start to look into other cars of the period and be like, start to have a goal of something they want to work towards because they saw it in either a movie or it was a poster car or something along those lines. It kind of can give them something to yearn towards.
Gotcha.
I think we're really seeing that right now with Mercedes, 80s and 90s Mercedes. Check a look at the values. There's going to be one selling at, I think it's going to be RM, if I'm not mistaken, this weekend in Amelia. I just saw it, I believe it was a 1989 Mercedes. There's a four-door, was almost came close to eclipsing a pre-war car. I think it was something along the lines of a... I can't remember what it was, but it was in the $300,000-$400,000 range. Wow. I think that early on, when the 80s and 90s car really started to kind of take off in terms of the value going up, we were seeing, like Nick said, the 512 and the Countach. Those are obviously the poster cars.
Yeah.
But now people are starting to look around and say, okay, what else was good from that era? It might not have been the most radical looking thing, but it's got a great engine. It's got, the right luxury. It's, there's this cool little mix to it. So I think we're going to start to see a lot more stuff come out of the woodworks and start going up in value as a result.
In a similar vein, there's a lot of cars that have that nostalgia factor that have then gotten to such astronomical values that people would think, oh, I wanted to buy this, I can't quite afford it. Okay, what's something similar? Like Porsche 912s have gone crazy because air-cooled 911s are pretty much unattainable at this point. So a lot of people still want that same look, but what's something that can be a little bit more practical. And so you look for other things that are in the similar area. So it kind of a rising tide raises many ships idea.
Now, Malcolm, you being involved with Cars and Coffee and how that event has grown and evolved over the last decade, what have you seen in regards to kind of like that mix of enthusiasts that have been coming out to the show?
Oh yeah, it's been very broad. I mean, you see all kinds of stuff now. I mean, from the Japanese imports, of course, with the rule of the dating rules for bringing rich cars over to the United States, has been. Now they can obtain a lot of those newer cars,
right?
Japanese cars, right-hand drive. You start to see a lot of those pop up, and people are, glance at them, take a second look, like, wait a minute, that's not from the States,
right?
So yeah, it's like I said, and the age demographic is so broad too. You're seeing a lot of people my age, younger, obtain these vehicles that they never would otherwise, take a look at, But yeah, Cars and Coffee is a good gauge as far as what's going on as far as the market going, and not to mention I have about 3 friends that all have attained a Testarossa here in the last few months. I mean, all of them red on tan, in a Testarossa. Yeah. So even that says something about what's going on.
Now, is that? Do you think they're buying? Are they buying for collectors and investment reasons, or are they buying
Not
because they just love
just
cheese grater side strakes?
They're my age, a little bit older. They always wanted one of those cars, and now they can afford one. But it's interesting to see, 3 of my friends just buy a Testarossa within a few months. That's just unheard of.
Yeah, no, definitely.
So it's that nostalgia, bringing it back.
Well, I mean, in just a few years ago, I mean, you could find, and it wouldn't exactly be like concourse edition, any like condition, but I mean, you could have bought a Testarossa for $60,000.
Yeah, I actually remember a local collector friend of ours. He bought 2 TRs, each of them for about, I think, like $45,000 because he got them on a steal. He waited like a year or so, and then he was able to sell them for about 120. Just like he hit the right timing on it. It's insane.
Yeah, and speaking of collector either increases in investments or bubbles, and I know we talked a little bit about air-cooled Porsches recently, and have we seen the peak in air-cooled land?
That's a good question. I hope the prices start to come back down a little bit. I'd sure like to have one. But I don't know. I think what we saw was a few years back, who I think kind of rode the wave at its peak was Jerry Seinfeld and Amelia.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Came in, sold off a lot of cars that he didn't need. And, that's when the market was kind of at its peak. And then we saw the Porsche 911R come out. And then, I heard about actually a friend here in Jacksonville. He went into a dealership and they told him, there's going to be a new car coming out. It's supposedly going to be called the 911R. We don't know anything about it. None of the details. If you would like, we can put down a deposit for it. And if a car called the 911R comes out, it will be yours. You'll get that slot, that allocation. He said, nah, I'm going to pass on that for now. Thanks for offering, though. Turns out they did come out with a 911R, and allocations, early allocations, special allocations, whatever, were trading hands for close to $1 million. So he lost out on that one, and even today, the cars are still worth, a pretty penny. I can't remember right where they're selling right now, but somewhere in the $250,000, $400,000 range, somewhere in that range. They kind of busted. And I think what Porsche did was, like, you know what? We don't want to be Ferrari. They, instead of riding this wave way up, increasing secondhand values, making these things unobtainable, they kind of undercut the market a little bit with the 911 GT3 Touring. And I think that's a great thing. I think the 911R still has its place. Talking to a gentleman here in town who has a 911R, he said it's an incredible car, and it's very different from a GT3 Touring in many ways. Very similar in others, but now there's still that other option that's more obtainable, if you will, for that manual transmission, the wingless GT3. So, I think it's something that Porsche's been conscious of, and I think they kind of prevented the market from going way too insane. Kind of managed it pretty well. I don't know. What do you guys think?
No, I agree. I mean, even on that same topic, I think a lot of manufacturers are trying to vie for what sticks with, attracting more people in certain segments. I know that Ferrari has their thing going on. It's kind of a mess right now with, you have to buy this car before you buy that one. You have to buy a Pisa before you buy this or Tributo or, whatever. But on that same token, it's like a lot of the, Porsche, on the other hand, I've driven the 911R several times and the GT3 Touring, I think the average buyer wouldn't be able to tell much of a difference, but on paper, some of these guys are like looking at the market, figuring out, oh, well, I can obtain this and nobody else has it yet. So I'm going to go for that, and I think I see a lot of that going on right now. So it's, like I said, the market's almost flooded in a sense, with some of the cars to choose from, and that whole dynamic. But manufacturers are still trying to figure out what can they release that's one-off, to attract another audience, additional crowd, not the same old people, that come in and buy the car, year after year, the brand newest, latest and greatest.
Right.
So it's like a hodgepodge of stuff, and not, throwing a fork in everything is the electric cars that are coming along, the electric sports cars, everyday cars, the SUV market, that's kind of killing sedans, sedans are kind of struggling to stay.
And minivans.
I was going to say they just discontinued.
How many minivans
Dodge,
do we have? What, 3 now?
Odyssey. They just discontinued the
Chrysler,
Great Caravan.
Pacifica.
The Pacifica.
And the
there's
Toyota
not.
Sienna.
That's just about it,
So, but SUVs are taking over in a sense.
But then you look at Volkswagen, who's talking about releasing a new EV van.
Yeah,
and that's
yeah.
on
That's
on
a
the
different
play.
play. That's
Oh,
a
yeah.
nostalgia play.
Right.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
referencing the
Yes.
bus, right?
Yeah, the bus.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's a nostalgia play. I want one of those.
Oh yeah, no, like seriously, I'm in the
It's
same boat.
Sweet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would definitely, because I've got a '69 Volkswagen convertible at home.
Really?
Nice. So I would love to park an EV bus next to it. Like that would just that'd be
And
great.
that I mean, having worked with EVs before, that platform makes sense. You've got the skateboard style chassis where you've got a battery pack lining the bottom. It's a nice flat bottom. Mm-hmm. You put the motors in between the wheels, and I mean the platform is just perfect for it. And everything above the battery pack, you can design. You know,
Yeah.
to
Just
your heart's
space,
content.
yeah.
The space is ample. You don't have to worry about the engine and all that good stuff like they had to on the original. So the kind of the sky's the limit on customization and design for that. So I'm interested to see what they actually do.
Yeah,
with it.
bottom line
Likewise.
is like the next 5 to 10 years is just going to be interesting. I mean, so many changes, so many things, like I said, so many dynamics just working in that, whole gearbox, I mean, it's like when we went from a 5-speed to a 10-speed, I mean,
Right.
we got 10 gears now. We have multiple gears just working against each other, so it's going to be interesting.
So Nick, what do you see in regards to new things coming out from manufacturers? How much of it is starting to become like a nostalgia play, like VW is doing now?
Huge amount, like so much. And American manufacturers don't seem to be recognizing that as much, but a lot of the German manufacturers, Porsche, VW, Mercedes, and such, they're absolutely trying to cash in on their older models, trying to bring back just this idea that like, oh, we've always made cool stuff and we're going to continue doing this. And it's really interesting to see where it's going and how they're trying to make that marketing come through. But I'm trying to think of like a specific example right now, and of course I'm going blank.
I
But
think the nostalgia play is interesting, though. I think it can be done really, really well. And I think when we think of nostalgia, the ones that did really well come to mind first. But then you kind of think about the ones that didn't, that tanked. And I want to be a little bit more political here when I'm talking about these cars. But you could think of maybe one or two from Ford that did not do so well in the from 2000 onwards. But ones that did do really well, the 2005, 2006 Ford GT. I mean, God, that car looks just like an original. It's crazy how they were able to get away with that and having safety things, and I mean, looking like a 60s Le Mans race car. That's crazy. How sometimes they just hit the nail on the head, and when they do, it works really well. But when they don't, it's awful.
But you also got to think a ton of stuff like that. They can go for the nostalgia play, and then it can tank at the beginning because like when they first made those, they had to make 5,000-6,000 of them in like a year or two because changing safety regulations, and they couldn't get rid of them. They were giving huge discounts.
They sat on
those.
a lot for a
And
while.
now, of course, some people have driven those things like 20,000 miles, and they're still getting their money back on what they paid for them or more. So it's like, sometimes it really doesn't kick in until the secondary market. Like people at least on the internet are going crazy for Spiker C8s right now. And I remember my very first Amelia Island, they had them there, and I was crawling in and out of those things. I was like 14, and they didn't care, and they just didn't seem to sell as well. But now they're going crazy. So there's so much stuff
Especially if you have that steering wheel, the propeller steering wheel.
Exactly.
You got
So
that's like gold.
So it's like it doesn't always seem to work for the manufacturer, but then like people after the fact will be like, oh, that's kind of cool. So it's like it really varies on where it might go. So yeah, execution is incredibly important. Like in terms of like I used to drive an old Chevy Blazer, and I think it was a lemon, but like I still had that connection to it to what it was. But nowadays, like whenever I see a Blazer, I'm like, I just slapped like a badge on another crossover. It's not like what I think of, and so. It real varies on like whenever they try to bring back a new name or a new brand or something along those lines and try and pull in that factor, whether they're going for that sense of brand history or if they're just trying to hit their next quarter numbers and slapping on
It's a good point. I mean, you really don't know which direction these manufacturers are heading. I mean, we live in a data age, so all this data they get, what are they actually doing with it? So I mean, the next day we see some weird kind of car come out and doesn't catch on until a few years later. To your same point, so it's kind of like a wait and see what. Throw whatever against the wall and see what sticks, I mean, you look at Mercedes-Benz for crying out loud. I mean, they have so many different vehicles, it's like they're actually literally throwing them against the wall. So, okay, these SUVs are going to stick. We'll get rid of this, So it's an interesting dynamic.
I think, do you guys see anything from the 80s and 90s talking about the millennial culture? Do you see anything that would fit the mold, or do you can you guys think of anything that's using 80s and 90s nostalgia.
Fit the mold in what terms?
In terms of it's like take the Nissan 370Z. It's been around for how many years now?
Yeah.
How cool would it be to have some sort of a little bit more nostalgia designed in there
Sure.
on the new iteration, whatever that comes out?
Yeah.
I mean, have you guys see anything that could really fit that?
I think
mold?
that's dying out. I mean, we had the bring back of the retro cars. I mean, look at the Dodge Challenger, the Chevy Camaro and stuff like that. The Mustang brought back that retro styling, but now it's manufacturers don't see that much return on investment as far as doing the R&D and all that stuff. And
I think there was a wave
retro
of
style vehicle
for a little while. Like you had like the PT Cruiser that came out.
Oh my goodness! That old hot rod style with like the Prowler and
we
such.
talk about that.
And people were like paying way over MSRP for PT Cruisers when they came out. Like it was a hot item, and now everyone looks back and it's like that was hot garbage.
Yeah.
Well, I guess now
it's full
we're talking
circle,
about it. The one that I was thinking of earlier is the 2002-3, I guess, Ford Thunderbird.
Oh,
the retro
yeah.
styling that just did not hit the mark.
Not at all.
Prime example.
Yeah, that porthole window. I don't know. They're cool enough, but they're just
Just didn't quite come through.
It tried.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and then has things completely swung in the other direction, and now we have the EV Mustang.
Yeah.
I think Ford did a good. I think they what I heard at first, I wanted to hate it, but what I heard they did was they looked around and said, okay, how can we make this thing cool? We can either come out with an EV and do the Chevy route with a bolt and the volt, whatever, or we could kind of reach into our bag of tricks and make it styled similar to something, kind of utilize what we have, and they did that with the Mustang. And, more power to them. If it's going to work, they have to come out strong. Why not utilize the Mustang name?
It's kind of the same way with like Dodge separated with SRT and made a whole different kind of brand of vehicles. And didn't like the Mustang Mach-E sell out like super quick for its first year? Like
it's just
it did really well. And so
Right.
it always seems like cars that enthusiasts on the internet hate, it's going to sell incredibly well. So it's like it's always this tear between what kind of what audience are you asking? Because a lot of enthusiasts.
Yeah, you always have to take it with a grain of salt, especially social media world. I mean, people comment what they want to comment. Keyboard warriors.
There's people that are complaining about like $100,000 car when they have a $2,000
Sure,
thing. It's like they're not in the market, and so it's like
Exactly.
it always varies.
Yeah.
Well, do we see kind of like that initial rush to a new product, like something like the Mach-E? And could that even be compared to something like the new Civic Type R, where the first couple years it was out, I mean, it sold over MSRP everywhere, no matter what. And then for the longest time, dealers still had a dealer markup on it, and then cars sat.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's, I think, a little bit of a law of diminishing return in regards and trying to capture upon that.
It's funny. We're sitting here talking about this. What's sitting right here on your computer? The new Giulia GTA.
Yeah.
Speaking of,
Yes. Yeah.
It's
I think
absolutely
they,
radical.
I think it's kind of weird that there's two seats in it, right? It's actually a 4-door car with 4 handles, which
Did the back doors open?
I don't know. I want to know. I want to crawl through that thing. It's
Not sure.
sweet
Or is it like
looking,
the
but
worst way to carry your kids around?
Hold on to the rails, man.
Just hold on to the roll bar.
I don't know. I think they hit the nail on the head with that one, though.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd love to drive it. I'll tell you that.
But even something like that, I mean, is that gonna really, spark off? Would they have rather put it in the Stelvio? Do a Stelvio.
I've heard that that's the route they want to take.
Yeah.
Is that the SUVs are going to be coming out with more SUVs? The 4C, the coupe is gone. The Spider's hanging on. Which those are. God, I love those cars.
They're such a blast to drive.
God, they're such a cool car. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm glad to see that they reinvested in their sedan, and not enough people are doing that.
You think about the trends of the automotive market. I mean, for myself, I've always been a manual, purist. It's like, give me a manual. I don't want anything else. But after driving so many different cars, I've probably driven like 1,000 different cars.
You've been in a few.
But yeah, I mean, it's funny. When I hop in a new car, I don't mind it being automatic. Believe it or not, now I mean, they're faster. I mean, some of them are somewhat engaging, I used to use the paddles a lot, but now I just let the computer figure it all out, believe it or not. But that's just like the sedans versus the SUVs. The SUVs before, it's like, I don't want an SUV, but now it's like, I just bought my wife one. It's like, these things are pretty cool. They're quick. They just released a new BMW X5M, 660 17 horsepower.
Jeez.
You know,
Yep.
I mean, stuff like that. You know, some of the journalists are even saying to themselves, like, well, I'd rather get this than, you know, one of the coupes or sedans. It's a multi-purpose vehicle. You know, you buy one, you don't have to buy your sports car. You don't have to buy your family car. You all got it in one vehicle, you know? So it's interesting to see where things are going, you know?
Yeah. So another topic, some recent events with the Geneva Auto Show being canceled due to things. And with that, many of the cars that would have been released or showcased at the show are now being released and showcased in an online method. So something like Hyundai just released their new EV.
Right.
And I have to say, it's a really good looking car. Whether or not it makes it to production, I don't know. But how important is the international auto circuit anymore?
Good points.
Very good question. I actually, personally, I kind of like the format they just did. What it allowed us to do is get a clear and concise vision of what they're releasing right away. It's all either, just generic, launch photos, or photos that the manufacturer is putting out of the car within, inside of the factory, or something along those lines, like McLaren just did, instead of a ton of different pictures coming at us from all sorts of different social media influencers and journalists of the car under these crazy lights with 1,000 people around it, just getting not great angles. We're getting to see the whole car right away, and just a clear, concise format.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic that's been around the circuit of the automotive journalist field. I mean, especially with a lot of the manufacturers pulling out of these major auto shows, people are wondering, it's like, so what's going on? But I can see why. You know, you think about Mercedes being at a major automotive show. I mean, they get to touch a lot of people, but is that their demographic? You know, you go to a local, like the Jacksonville Auto Show.
Yep.
Does Mercedes really belong there? You know, I mean, selling some of their upper tier vehicles. You know, not that many people are going to really purchase those cars versus taking that money and having more focused events or more releases online, or you invite a bunch of journalists to your own press junket, you know.
Right.
It's more of a focused audience. You get to nail the product, you know, reveal everything about the product, go in depth in it, versus the auto show is just too broad, I think.
That, or a lot of manufacturers are going for like tech shows for new reveals and all this kind of stuff. And I think Elon started a whole idea of like treating a car manufacturer as a tech company. And so many people were, it seems like a few years ago, so many manufacturers were like, well, if we release at an auto show, everyone else is releasing a car too. So then we're in this mixed bag of like, okay, this was released, this was released, and this was released. But if we do a tech show, then we're going to be the only one with a car. And so we're going to get all eyes on us. Well, then everyone had that idea. And so it was pretty much the same thing where we're like, what's that big tech show out in Las Vegas every year? It's like
CES.
Like so many cars get released out there, especially in terms of EV. So it's weird where things are going in that sense.
They have to be careful too. Remember the McLaren Senna launch?
Oh my goodness!
Disaster. We got the initial photos of that car from cell phones.
Yeah, it's all cell phones. I remember
from the people who are buying those. They're not usually the greatest of photographers.
I remember
it was under horrible lighting.
I remember when that video came out. It was like the first thing I ever saw was some guy on Instagram with a video of that car driving through McLaren Technology Center, and the first thing to do, like when it comes up, is someone just saying Jesus, and like it was like, dude, like that's the first thing that came out, and then like 2 days later they came out with all the press stuff, and it's like, that's like the impression's already been made.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking somewhat of a switch to kind of even like an Apple style. You know,
I was just gonna say that.
you have the designer and the engineers and everyone that's behind the vehicle.
Exactly. I mean, Elon comes out on stage, the car rolls out, everybody oohs and ahs. He tells you what he wants you to know right away, and then the designer comes out, shatters the window,
a window or two.
I would love to see that become traditional in every new car launch. Just break everything. Here's the first one we're going to destroy.
The hottest thing on the internet for the longest, you know. I mean, that was, on the national news.
There were a ton of people saying, like, was this all on purpose? Because the second after the Cybertruck came out, everyone was talking about it. How many memes did you see about that car? It was everywhere, and you couldn't escape it. And so it's that idea of, if it's everywhere, then does it become normalized? And when people actually see it in person, is it going to be not as like radical as when you first thought? So like marketing nowadays is just kind of crazy.
Marketing departments are paying attention to that stuff, and like I said, they want more focused audiences, and they, like I said, they can get the data down to a T. So now they put it to work, get some more return on investment. So
and I think that journalists still have a space in those sorts of launches, and that's the thing is I think by kind of going against the whole international auto show circuit. I don't think it's disparaging to journalists in any way. I think that they still have their niche within this this whole Apple style launch, like what Tesla has. And heck, I mean, with Tesla, you get the presentation and then you get right out into the car right away. They cycle journalists through these things, so they get an initial test drive right away. So it might even be better in some regards. But I think that I'd really like to see somebody like Mercedes or Porsche, they're a company with a lot of money to throw into one of these kinds of launches.
Sure.
Give it a try as well. Because with Tesla, I have friends that have gone out to the launches. I've had the chance to go out. I haven't gotten the chance to go out and actually do it, but I've had the invite, and I've really wanted to. From what I've heard, they're fun. But having the power behind it from a major company could be really cool. It just has to be done right.
And I think with like the SAC Collective, I think some of the events that you guys have done have been with some of the manufacturers.
Absolutely.
And I could see a shift into some more of these more like really targeted events.
Yeah, it works.
Or like the type of events you're talking about, whether it's a big staged event, but it's for Mercedes only, for BMW only, things like that. Like, what type of feedback have you gotten from the manufacturers that have kind of interacted with the group?
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's great feedback. I mean, when they can sell a couple cars just by coming out to an event, I mean, can't beat that, So, I mean, we've had a couple of Rolls Royce events where we sold two Rolls Royces, sold two Phantoms, believe it or not, through our club. So, just in having a Rolls Royce event and having that vehicle there where one of the guys can sit in it and check it out, for themselves. And plus it's a nice environment too, where you're around like-minded people too. So that helps as well. But
I think the dealers. I mean, I haven't gotten the chance to talk to them about it, but it seems like the dealers like it.
Oh, they do.
The alternative is that for them to come out and do an event with like a wealth manager or something. And these wealth managers just invite Ferrari out to come out to their event to show off to their clients, and the clients drive it, and then they go home, and nobody even really buys a car. It's all for show. But when it comes to the SAC Collective, these guys get out. They get to talk about the cars and experience the cars that they've all been chatting about with one another for a while now. And it's kind of hard to not pull the trigger on something so sweet when you get the chance to get behind the wheel and your buddy's looking at you.
Absolutely.
Well, you guys had the SUV event, so that one kind of stands out to me. Was that a manufacturer supported event, or was that something you were able to kind of get press demo cars all together at the same time?
It was a mix actually of us. Local dealerships brought in some of the vehicles, because some of those we had to kind of hunt them down.
Right.
The new Jaguar F-Type. What's it? The
F-Pace.
F-Pace. I'm sorry, F-Pace SVR. We had to try to scramble to find one of those. We wanted to put out there and check it out.
And just to give everybody some background, so the SUV event you guys held, how many different SUVs did you have?
Oh gosh, I had about 9 or 10.
Yeah. So 9 or 10 in an off-road environment.
Correct.
Oh, really? I didn't know about that.
Yeah. So dirt, gravel, hills, some mud.
And you have to understand, SUVs now aren't really, catered to the off-road. They can go off-road.
Right.
They have street tires, so the makeup of actually putting a modern SUV on an off-road course is kind of iffy, somewhat. But yeah, we prepped the surface and did stuff like that.
Right. Yeah. Like it wasn't like you
the
just
dirt,
like went, overlanding
most
in a
of them had
Cullinan.
street tires anyway. only a few of them had all-season tires, but
how do you add value to it though? Too. I mean, from a club perspective, if I'm I'm a car guy and I have the opportunity to go test drive a new Jaguar F-Pace, I just go to the dealership.
Right.
Yeah.
But, just because I'm not going to be taking it off-road every day when I eventually buy one doesn't mean that I don't want to. And through the SAC Collective, I got to do it.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's a cool value proposition.
And you also got to think that's a cool story to go in it too. It's like, oh, you're going over some sand dunes, all this kind of stuff. You're having fun. Then you're going to want to show your friends like, hey, look what I got to do. It's like, oh, what car
who gets
is
to
that?
do that?
So
I mean,
it's a fun time.
Rolls Royce Cullinan.
Yeah, those crazy stories.
Yeah, we had
they
the
go
Rolls Royce
far.
off-road.
Yeah.
It was pretty amazing. Yeah. You can check out the pictures on the saccollective.com. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, that was the one when I saw the Cullinan going up a dirt hill.
Yeah.
With dirt and mud on the side. Like this wasn't like the Celebration Exotic
right.
Car Festival where
Yeah.
you had the crystal glasses out and everything else. So it looked like a lot of
That all
fun.
goes about, back to like catering to your audience. I think that's what the manufacturers are trying to do more of is cater to a specific audience, for each of their different vehicles. So I imagine manufacturers like Mercedes have a hard time doing that because they have such a broad range of vehicles, all the way from a $30-something thousand A-Class, all the way up to a Maybach or, the GTR, so it's a wide range. So they have a lot of work to do.
Even if you go to like the 6x6 or like 4x4 lawn delay and all that kind of stuff, you're getting
Yeah.
into millions of dollars for a factory
That's
model.
right.
It's just
That's
insane
right.
what they do with some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's one sitting here in Jacksonville right now.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't know if you guys have seen that. There's a G-Wagon Maybach, the
Yeah.
lawn delay,
Lawn delay, yeah.
and
That's right.
yeah, it's listed for
1.5, I think.
1 million, 1 million,
Yeah.
5, something like that.
Yeah.
There's a
Around
market
there.
for it.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Yeah.
So getting back a little bit to the concourse, because obviously here, at least the time of taping, we have the Amelia Island concourse coming up this weekend. Where do we see the future of concourses coming over the next 10 to 20 years? So I know we talked a little bit about kind of the current generation's interest in 20s, 30s, brass era, some really like vintage niche cars that there's only one or two ever made, things like that. How does that bode for the concourse circuit and the shows?
I'll jump in on this one because I actually interned with the Concours for a summer, kind of trying to give a younger enthusiast idea on it. And there's big names of like Pebble Beach, Philadelphia, Amelia, and such. I feel like they're always going to have a place. But something we're seeing in a lot of the concourse circuit is these smaller shows are shutting down. They just can't either bring the audience, people don't want to bring out their cars, or it's just not quite reaching people in the same way that it did. Meanwhile, we're seeing shows like Radwood and Lufka Coolt and other things that are focusing on a different demographic, actually focusing on driving the cars, enjoying them rather than judging them and saying like, oh, I have the best car, no, I have the best car, and all this kind of stuff are exploding in popularity. So I think there's always going to be the passion and people are going to want to share that, but just the medium in which it goes through is going to change.
I think that somebody who's going to do an incredible job ushering in the future of the Concours is Chris Brewer.
Oh, absolutely.
I think Chris has seen, something that Nick and I have been pestering the Concours about for quite some time, and pestering Chris in particular about. And that's 80s and 90s cars. He's got his dream car class, and
he fought hard for it.
He did, and good on him. There's going to be some really cool stuff this year. Some stuff that I haven't seen before that I've wanted to see.
Oh, same here.
There's some bucket list cars on there that we're going to have come out, and I think it's all about how Amelia can plus the show. So that's what they refer to it at Disney. How do you add value constantly? How once the allure of Cinderella's castle wears off, why do people keep coming back?
What's next?
What's next? So I think what we're going to see is we're always going to have these cars out on the field getting judged, getting graded. But I don't think that it's necessarily something for just the old folks. I think there are some really cool brass era cars out on the show field at Amelia.
doubt, yeah.
But if you take a look at the class list, it's maybe dozen and a half cars from that era, and then the rest are a lot more diversified with Roger Penske and Porsche and Scaglietti. You're seeing a lot of cars from the 60s, 70s, even up into the 80s and 90s, and they're race cars. I think that's one thing that Amelia really has. That value there, that you're getting such a diversified field versus like Pebble, which is amazing. It's so much more stringent in terms of the criteria for getting on the show field.
Yeah, like Amelia this year, they're doing a class of cars that just think are cute and all this kind of stuff. Or, they always do a really good preservation showing. And so it's a lot more, like you said, diversity in what kind of cars you'll see. And one thing that I always said when I was at the Concours is, if you bring in, like there's certain cars that we want to see. Like I remember when I was a kid, the very first Concours I ever went to, like I was absolutely freaking out because I got to see Bugatti Veyron for the first time. And I was just like glued onto that car and I absolutely loved it. And that was like the highlight. But the thing was, once I was there and I saw that, I was then exposed to everything else. And that year they honored like the Porsche 917 and the Mercedes-Benz 300 SL. And once I saw those, I realized like, oh, I've never seen this before. This is super cool, and I want to learn more. So it's like if you can like kind of hook people in with one thing, and then they'll be exposed to the rest. And that's one way you can kind of grow the passion around older vehicles that people may not have grown up with or might not know the story of. But then once you learn about it, you really want to find more and go after that kind of stuff.
Yeah, my first Amelia in 2009, I was walking up, parked down the street, down the road, like you might have to do if you get late, like I did that year. And every year, I was hiking, and
I love seeing a Ferrari parked half in a ditch.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a unique thing. As I was walking up, a Bugatti Veyron comes pulling out of the Ritz, and I got to see it in motion. That's my first experience, first memory at the Amelia Concours, a Veyron in motion.
Nice.
And then I walked out of the show field, and one other car from that year that really stuck in my mind was a Miura. And I mean, that's a car from the 60s?
Yeah.
Late 60s.
Late 60s. And that's not a brass era car. I think there's so much more to the Amelia Concours in particular, and Concours in general. And we're starting to see so many little other things surrounding this show that are really adding value to the show, really bringing people in. So as long as they continue that, I think it's going to be fine.
Yeah, quickly. It's funny. Me and Chris talk about this all the time, and he bounces ideas off of me, and same thing, off of him. I hate to say it, it's no longer the old white guys, show.
Yeah.
It's just changing. We have to, you have to cater to a different demographic coming in there. You have the millennials, and it's hard to mix that stuff because, people younger just don't understand that concept, looking at older cars like, okay, what's exciting about this?
Right.
So it's a balancing act, and I think Chris has done an excellent job, with listening to other peers and listening to other people as far as what they want to see and bringing in a new demographic and fresher, different color faces,
Right.
Different people altogether. So it's going to be interesting, So.
If I may here, I think that something I would like to see, not just from the Amelia Concours. Amelia Concours supports things like this really well, but I think just overall, in general, the entire car community, I think where we need to see a lot more value getting added is supporting automotive photographers. In the right
A little
way.
self-plug in there.
A little self-plug.
Yeah.
But I mean, really,
I have a good rate. Trust me. Like, I can do good work.
My Instagram handle is.
but
This
really,
one guy right here needs to have more work. I promise you'll get returned. Anyway, go on.
all four of us have picked up a camera and pointed it at a car.
I mean, that's how I got started.
We do it.
Yeah.
Some of us have made careers out of it.
Yeah.
It's something that I can't get behind the wheel of a Ferrari 250 GTO, but I can experience it in a unique way by pointing my camera at it. It gets me involved with the car. And that's how I got involved in the car community. That's how Nick got involved in the car community. And it's put us in positions where we had no business being other than having a camera.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I think it needs
Way
to be,
too many times.
and I said, it needs to be fostered in the right way because what we're seeing out in Pebble right now, where city council is going to be limiting starting in 2021 the number of shows because things have gotten so wild. You saw, from what I understand, I hadn't been out there and I wasn't out there at the time, but a bunch of the photographers are blaming the YouTubers and the YouTubers are blaming the photographers.
Yeah.
But in reality, it was just a bunch of idiots out on Ocean Avenue.
Everyone has,
And that's, I think it needs to be fostered in the right way. I think there's an incredible outlet that's not being taken in. Actually, you know what? I hate to say that. Now that I think about it, one group that is doing it right is Lufgekalt. You've got a guy like Jeff Swart who has just an incredible eye for design, and you look at Lufgekalt and their entire show is set up for the photographer's eye.
Yeah.
The way they stage the cars. I would like to see more of that sort of thing. A car looks great on a show field, and that's a certain, it's an experience. It's a certain experience, but I think there are so many opportunities for experiences that get people involved. It might not be driving a car, but experiencing a car through that.
In a similar sense of being involved with the car, one thing that I feel like, at least I know Cason, I can, maybe Malcolm can as well, but something that really originally brought me into this, even though I started in automotive photography, the very first thing that got me into it was video games, because, I wouldn't have access to, as we look over here, like a Porsche 917 or 250 GTO or a Shelby Cobra, but I can go on Forza and they've 3D laser scanned that car. You can sit in it. You can throw that around Le Mans as much as you want, and that can be like, oh my goodness, this is crazy. And then that can make you want to be like, okay, I want to see one in person. And it's like, you may not always have access to that stuff, but like it gets people involved and makes people realize, like, learn what a Lola T70 is, or what, like an AMC Spirit is, and things that you may not have known about, but then you can learn about through that medium, like what's accessible from new enthusiasts and how are they going to learn about this?
So would that be looking at, I think, some events that have provided and this is just for myself, at least in my opinion, that have provided some great access to cars in an environment in which they're really meant to be used, not necessarily sitting on a show field. But one I really enjoyed, this is the first time I had gone to it, was the HSR Classic 24 in Daytona.
Such a good event.
Yeah,
And it was one of those, like, I couldn't believe I only lived 45 minutes from Daytona and I hadn't been to this event before. I could not believe the amount of access to the quality of cars that were there. I mean, you had a pair of the 300 Gullwing SL race cars, like, just there, like, poking my head in, you know, touch a fender, talk to the guys. I mean, it was fantastic.
Yeah.
And then even, I think, Celebration, the Exotic Car Festival, does a good job because they have their track day at Daytona.
Yep.
And again, I showed up, I think at 7:30 in the morning that day for the track day. I guess all the drivers were in the drivers meeting. So I had the entire garage of every single car to myself.
Yes.
And as far as for someone who enjoys cars, is trying to take decent pictures of cars, I mean, it was fantastic. So being able to be in an element like that was great.
It's an amazing feeling walking into the paddock of Daytona and just seeing all the stuff that's in there, isn't it? Like, just absolutely incredible. And you kind of stop for a second, like, I'm among greatness right now. Like, it's so cool.
Yeah, and not just cars, but the drivers that show up.
Yeah.
For the event
Yogan
too.
Moss was
Yeah,
piloting the 300
SL.
around the high banks
Yeah.
of Daytona, and you could just walk up and talk to him and talk, see the car, and it was, the accessibility is
That's
fantastic.
one thing I love about Amelia. You just walk through the hallways of the Ritz, like, yeah, there's Jochen Moss, there's Derek Bell, there's Herbie Haywood. There's everyone is all. It's not like there's a better class, like, and they're hidden away in the shadows. Everyone's there, and everyone's just happy to talk about the passion. So that's one. Of the
Yeah, I mean, a
incredible
couple
things.
years ago, I was standing. I forgot what Porsche I was standing by, but I'm sitting there, and some guy says some comment over my shoulder, and I'm like, yeah, and I turn around, and it's Magnus Walker, and you sit there, and you can just talk cars with literally anybody. So yeah, it's a good time.
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. Getting signs from the producer here. Cool. So we're doing good. So as we kind of getting towards the sunset of the show, I just kind of want to get some final words from everybody. I know we talked a lot about car culture, where we think it's at, where we think it's going. My last question for everybody, and to kind of get everyone's opinion. So I've heard varying opinions on where we're at in the collector's market as far as the ultra high end. So not your, 90s Ferrari or anything else, but I'm talking like hypercar territory or 250 GTO territory. And a lot of them say it's indicative of what's happening in that market now, as indicative of where things are going for the rest of the market over the next couple of years at least.
Absolutely.
So I believe we've seen some declining prices in a lot of like the ultra high end, including, again, 250 GTO and things like that. They haven't been pushing the bar north over and over and over like they had been over the last several years. What do you guys feel is happening at the top end, and is that indicative of what's happening to the market over the next couple of years?
Well, I'll quickly say, like, bringing out some of the newer vehicles that are kind of overshadowing something that was 5-10 years old. I mean, maybe it's the same model, or for instance, maybe it's a McLaren, like the 720S. Say you bought a 720S a few years back, and now they have the 765.
765. Yeah.
So you buy this stuff. It's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna buy this. It'll, the value will naturally go up on it. Put it in my garage, not put that many miles on it. But the minute you look around, the manufacturer comes out with another improved version of that. That kind of hurts the market in a sense. But I can speak on those terms as far as modern day vehicles, as far as putting those away as collectors. I know with like even my Shelby GT350, when I purchased it, it had markups on it. Luckily, I didn't pay a markup, but because I knew someone. But even that, the manufacturer decided several years later to produce additional vehicles, so I'm out of luck as far as making that a collector car. And I might as well just drive it and have fun with
some
it.
miles on it.
Well, I would anyway, but
yeah. But do you think, is that a push now with modern like modern cars? Are the manufacturers just continually trying to one up each other? Is that forcing?
Yeah.
Is that forcing the newer and the better to always continually come out, and there really is going to be a point in which there's not really like that one unicorn car anymore that hangs out for a while and really kind of achieves that cult collector, classic status?
Sure. It's almost like, making a light bulb. Used to, the incandescent bulbs would blow all the time, and they had to go back to the manufacturer to purchase more. Now the manufacturers are wising up. They're like, okay, if I build a LED bulb that lasts forever, they're never going to come back and purchase from me. So I might as well make something, different, that attracts more people to come by, spend their money, so, or else we'll go out of business,
So what are the chances? And I know we're kind of a little bit of a tangent. So what are the chances right now of a modern day 250 GTO even being made again?
And what do you what do you mean?
Yeah, because
So like having that one car 50 years from now that they look back on.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a lot of cars now where they're one of one,
Right,
one of
right,
five, one
right.
of 10.
every
McLaren F1, right?
yeah, well, I was
I
gonna
mean-
say at least in modern age, most expensive modern car is the McLaren F1 that's LM.
Right.
So
But
there's a lot
what is
though.
the likelihood of that happening again?
Oh,
I guess-
today.
I guess-
somebody.
It's something
right.
made today. Like it would have been, let's say the
Ford
Geneva
GT.
show went off, and there's 10 of them made. Because I mean,
Right,
look at
right.
people like Bugatti,
Right.
who are
Well,
making
it
one
can't
offs
be
every
contrived.
day.
I think it can't be contrived. I think
Yeah.
that's one issue that we're seeing with like the law, whatever it is that Bugatti just made. It's X amount of millions of dollars, and they made it to be that.
Right.
I don't think it inherently makes it worth that much down the line. I think that, I mean, look at the 250 GTO and the McLaren F1. The 250 GTO, why is it worth so much? It's a great car. It's a beautiful car.
It dominated
It
heritage.
dominated. But they made how many?
36 or 39,
36,
including
okay.
the 330 models.
So and they all still exist.
Yeah.
So that's part of that collectability factor. And then the McLaren F1, they did not sell the way they should have in the 90s. Hell, they weren't worth nearly as much as they are. I remember, you could pick one up. You hear stories about picking one up for under $1 million. Just
Yeah, if you ever want to
15
ruin your
years, 20
day,
years ago.
you ever want to ruin your day, look at auction prices from like 2004 and stuff like that. You'll find like a Ferrari Daytona for like $60,000 or McLaren F1 for $900,000. Not that I could even afford that nowadays, but it's like it's still just insane.
I think time will tell on that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I think the next F1 and 250 GTO, it'll surprise us.
And it's like I feel like you're not going to quite get that in the sense of the GTO because of its racing heritage and all that kind of stuff. Because there's such a disconnect nowadays in terms of like what a race car is versus a car that you buy on the road. So like you can't buy a street version of the Toyota that won Le Mans or anything along those lines.
right.
But you can get cars that are unicorns in a sense, and it kind of does seem like a car has to fail at the beginning to be worth a lot in the end, because if everyone loves it at the beginning, everyone wants one, they make a ton of them. Like the fact that there's undersupplied F1s, and I know like when I was a kid and I was playing Midnight Club and Forza and Gran Turismo, what was always the top car? The McLaren F1, and so I always grew up idolizing that car, and I had to work towards it and I had to get it, and there's so few and far in between. It was the fastest car. It's really interesting. But also in the similar sense of what Cason said, there's just so many cars coming out right now that are I swear every day a manufacturer's listening, like, okay, we're making
Something
20
new.
of this car and it costs $10 million and they're all sold
And they're
out.
already all
and
sold.
It's like, and I've always wondered, is this just the same like 300 guys that are buying all of these cars? How many
I'm
people
wondering, like,
really
where are these cars going?
how many people really have like $10 million in disposable income for like a single car? And so who knows what's going to happen in terms of like the one-off cars when everyone, like any manufacturer is willing to build you a boutique custom one-of-one car if you throw enough money
the
at it.
bespoke programs.
Yeah.
You see small glimmers of it nowadays, but you have the factor of technology and the way they produce cars now that's thrown in there. And like you said, with the number of cars they produce, but we see small glimmers, maybe like something like the Supra on a much smaller scale, but it's a vehicle. If you obtain a manual twin turbo Supra, the value is just going to go up. You're not wasting your money on it.
Right.
That's something you can, that's an investment in a
Yeah,
sense.
it's not going to go
yeah.
down.
Actually,
But-
now that sorry, go ahead.
But they've made so many of them. It's going to take so long before that reaches anywhere near a level of a GTO. So
Well, now that
sure.
you say that, I think about like the orange Supra from Fast and Furious, like the actual
Sure.
car. If that ever sold in like 10, 20 years, there's going to be some
right.
super rich kid who grew up watching that movie, idolizing. It's like, I'm going to pay whatever I need to get that car. So who knows what that car may be, but that's something that I feel like.
So in order,
people can
so
rely behind.
so there's got to be now some type of. I don't think a manufacturer can intentionally build that car. I think something has to happen
Right.
to that car in order to kind of like, again, we keep talking about the 250 GTO. It's racing heritage.
Sure.
Yeah.
Beautiful car. You could buy the road going version, all that stuff. Now we talk about something like Paul Walker's Fast and Furious.
Porsche GT. Yeah.
Yeah,
Carrera
like where
GT.
there has to be like a movie or something special. Like you look at like some of like James Dean's old cars that come up.
Yeah.
You know, those types of things.
I think as we talk about it, I think it's something that may add a lot of value is a subset. So we look at the 250 GTO. Think about all the great cars that Ferrari produced in the 50s, 60s, 70s. And why does the 250 GTO stand out? There's, 30 some odd cars. They all were, great in their field. And they stand up. The McLaren F1, 106 of them. But of that 106, how many are road cars versus GTRs? How many of those road cars are are F1 LMs? So you look at that subset, and then now thinking about it too. What year did the Zonda Cinque come out?
Like 2010,
I think, something like that.
I think a little earlier.
So,
but, yeah.
2009, 2010, somewhere in that range. Yeah. That's a car. 5 made of the Roadster, 5 made of the Coupe, and those cars are trading hands for 10 million plus.
Like a non-Cinque, like special edition 760 Zonda sold more than Michael Schumacher's Grand Prix winning F1 car in Abu Dhabi recently.
Exactly.
So
those things are crazy. So I think, but then at the same time, the Huayra, they're making so many. There's so many special editions, kind of like what we saw maybe a little with the Veyron or the Chiron. Now the values aren't holding. Everybody gets their specification just to their liking. So when you go to try to sell it secondhand, there's a couple out there that just cannot be offloaded right now.
like
that
that dark brown Super Sport Veyron. That's it happens to match a certain color.
Yes, and so I think maybe that next car, that next 250 GTO, will be a sub variant of something that's already got a lot of value, or that something that's super desired, like the Cinque, like the F1 LM, like the 250 GTO.
Yeah. Could it come from a major manufacturer, or does it have to come from a boutique?
Well, I know.
So could Mercedes
Porsche.
or Porsche put one out, or does it have to come from somebody like Pagani?
I mean, you look at some of the Porsches, or even the Veyron, for instance. They purposely designed the interior so it has a timeless design, and it doesn't have that many screens that age, or software to update that ages, So it's manufacturers are paying attention to that as well. So
Bentley and Rolls-Royce doing that too. The way their screens flip away, so that the thing that'll date a car the quickest is a screen.
Timeless designs too. I mean, you can always recognize a Bentley or a Porsche or a Bugatti Veyron, So
I remember when I was a teenager, one of the cars that I absolutely lusted after was the Maybach Landaulet, like the 62 Landaulet, because they made like 3 of them. It's this ultra opulent thing. I thought, like, that is absolutely crazy. Like, I need to have one when I'm a mega rich collector, all this kind of stuff. It's brilliant. Well, I finally saw one about 6 months ago, and like you said, the very first thing that I saw was this screen and an old like portable DVD player and like RCA inputs, and I'm like, man, that looks kind of bad nowadays.
Exactly.
It's like this thing was like a $2 million car, and so but that absolutely dated it. So you got to think, what's the future going to be like, and with all these touchscreens and all this kind of stuff, what's going to happen?
You can go back to basics with the analog, analog gauges, all that stuff. So never wrong going with that. So
yeah,
because like once like if you have a new thing, once it's no longer new, it's just a thing. And so
Nissan GTR, I thought that was so cool when that came out.
Yeah,
was it? There was the PlayStation 2 design, Polyphony Digital, whoever it was that designed
Polygon design.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Today I'm like, oh wow, that looks terrible. But it was so futuristic in 2008, 9, 7, whatever.
They still
it was.
sell them.
Yeah. All right. So since there are 3 of you here, I'm going to have you each pick kind of like your one unicorn car. Just one. And then we're going to play the daily race and crush.
Unicorn car?
Yep. So so each of you will give me one. And if you end up picking the same car, someone's going to have to choose a different unicorn. Because someone's unicorn's getting crushed.
Maybe Toyota 2000 GT.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, something different. If I can fit it in, probably can barely fit in it, but James Bond couldn't fit in it, you know. So
Casey and I talk about this all the
Disclaimer.
time, so I hope he picks this one certain car that I'm thinking of, because now I have like a new idea and I don't want to like have to.
I don't know, man. I feel like this changes day by day.
It really does.
Ask me tomorrow and it'll be a new answer.
It depends on like
Yeah,
what you
yeah.
experience and all this kind of stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One car. I want to say something that's like one car that can kind of do it all, and that's why my eye keeps getting trained to the wall here with the 250 GTO. While that might not be my ultimate car, I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm a product of the '90s, so I guess I'm gonna have to say McLaren F1 LM.
I was hoping you were going to say
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
All
Because,
right.
that's absolutely amazing. When it comes to unicorn cars, I've been lucky enough to really get around some absolutely incredible stuff, like absolutely like lust after kind of cars that you think absolutely unobtainium. And something I've realized is it happens for both regular and Halo cars, that there's some cars that are just completely idolized. They are trade for tens of millions of dollars. And then you finally like get behind the wheel and you drive it and you're like, this kind of sucks. It's like, it's got a great history behind it, but like as a car, this sucks. But there's a lot of interesting cars like that. That are ones that are just pure race cars where, you think this amazing idea behind it, but the guys who made it, they just thought it just needs to be light and fast. It doesn't need to be comfortable. It doesn't need to be cool. It doesn't need to do anything. It just needs to go. And like for some preservation cars, it does the same. And so it's really interesting. However, there are other cars that 100% live up to the name. Like, thanks to some wonderful friend of mine that I have at the Simeon Museum in Philadelphia, which is best car collection in the world. Like with bar none, absolutely incredible. I've been able to get in Shelby Cooper Daytona Coupe,
Nice.
been in Bugatti Type 57 G Tank. It was like 37 Le Mans winner. I've gone in like GT40s, like absolutely incredible. And one car that they had recently for a whole Ford versus Ferrari promotion was Lorenzo Bandini's Le Mans car. It was like has so many race cars. It got a new body and like got changed to a different configuration. But when I was in it, it was a 365 P4, and just the V12 screaming behind that thing. And like when I only got to go for riding it because who's going to throw the keys to me when it's worth $40 million. Like the owner was like getting it sideways, and it was the most exhilarating thing I'd ever been in. So I used to always think, McLaren F1 LM or Zonda Cinque or something like that. But once I finally experienced that, also the windshield came up to like here, so like it was just air right in there. That would have to be what I would go with. I still want to get behind the wheel of a 917, but like that thing is just crazy. And I don't care if I need to get groceries in it, if I need to like go pick up the kids. Like they can walk. I want my car. I want my 365 P5.
So is that what you're picking for your
I
unicorn?
think that's the craziest car I've ever been in so far, that I would have to say, in terms of just like pure absolute excitement that I couldn't believe what it was like. So that's what I have to go. It's a little bit more niche, but it's just the most craziest kind of car. And I've been in like, twin turbo Koenigsegg's and just absolutely nuts stuff. But that thing just,
Something different.
oh, absolutely.
Nice. All right, so now we have our three. So I'll go around each one of you. You get to pick which one you would daily, which one you would race, and which one you would crush. So who wants to step up for that first?
I'm crushing. Sorry, Malcolm. The Toyota.
it's fine.
I'm gonna have to daily the McLaren 3 seats.
Yeah.
Dog and the girlfriend.
Sure.
Or both girlfriends.
And I guess the other was race.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm racing the Ferrari.
Yeah. Finished for our Le Mans race car.
Yeah.
And I actually honestly have to do the same. Like I love the GT, and I would
cry.
love to daily that. It's such a gorgeous car. It's one of my favorites out there. But just like it's when you're looking at that kind of panel, it's like there's nothing obvious, and so something has to eat the dirt.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, you're over 6 foot tall, so like it's not gonna work
it's
for
not-
you
yeah, it's not gonna work.
at all.
Yeah.
Well, this is like fit,
Yeah.
notwithstanding. So like not worrying
Right.
about fit or actual real
Sure.
it's like
comfort.
what do you want to walk into your garage and see kind of stuff?
Yeah, that type of
Just
deal.
an art piece. Yeah. I'd do the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
It's a hard one, honestly, because I mean,
Yeah,
there's just so
yeah.
much stuff out there. When everything's a unicorn, it's like,
Sure.
there's different levels of unicorn, because, there's like, we all have that car that it's like, oh man, I would love to have one on one day. Maybe like, when you're down the line, you have some money, okay, maybe I can get that. And maybe that's your obtainable unicorn. And then there's other stuff where it's like, okay, unless I hit oil in the next week, I'm probably not going to be able to get it at some point. But, maybe I'll be lucky enough to experience. So
Very cool.
it's always a hard thing. How about you?
Jeez. So
We haven't been asking you
I'm
anything.
actually an old school Toyota guy. So I'm actually going to, I daily the 2000 GT.
Nice.
Oh God, I love Ferrari, but yeah, I would have to race the Ferrari and crush the McLaren.
Oh, ouch.
I love the McLaren, but like Ferraris were always my poster cars.
Sure.
I've always kind of had this weird undying allegiance to Toyotas because I've owned. I think we've had
MR2s.
5 different MR2s over the
Oh,
years.
that's awesome.
But yeah, and so the McLaren, like as cool of a car as it is, and I love it, and I got to photograph one recently, and that was great. But yeah, I would have to go to the recycler.
You can crush one of the ones in Brunei.
Yeah, I
Hasn't
was
moved in,
literally
like,
thinking that.
30
They're beyond repair as it is. So go ahead and just crush
Just
those.
sat out in the desert in the hot sun in
Oh,
a glass
no.
building for like 30 years, never moving.
All right, so one final question.
Sure.
So we're looking now with the upcoming group of cars that we feel are, the 80s and 90s, these collector cars. What is, at least in your opinion, and kind of based on current prices, what is the best car for someone to look at investment-wise under 50 grand?
Under 50. Something new?
It could
Or
be
anything?
pretty much anything at this point.
Wait, so anything from the 80s and 90s or like anything that like
Oh, we
is
could
like
even
a
say
new
now if you
manufacturer?
wanted to.
Something unmolested. Something Japanese and unmolested. If it's
Yeah,
got it.
Supra.
Supra. I mean, but those have gone up now over
Yeah.
50. So I mean,
It's like you've
You might find
Honda CRX.
Yeah.
I mean, something simple like that. I think that's going to go up in value. I mean,
Integra Type R.
the plug here, the latest, I guess, the February issue of the Hagerty magazine was dedicated to the bull market list. It's our 3rd year of doing it, and we choose, I think it's around 10 cars that we see that are going to be going up in value over the next year, and we hold ourselves accountable for the previous years. And last year, I think we only got one wrong where it didn't go up in value really. The others did. This cover, I'll get you guys a copy, has the Honda CRX on the cover. You've got that. You've got the 1997 Viper GTS. You've got a few others on there. BMW Z3, Z3M.
The old clown shoe.
Z4 Coupe, M Coupe. Those, I think, definitely all are going to be going up in value if they haven't
I
already.
think the Bronco as well was on
Bronco, yeah. I mean, Broncos are hot. So,
But if you have one, so you're still sticking with that JDM
Let's-
clean.
yes.
I mean, you're definitely right. Like original, unmolested, low mile, and if it has any kind of driver history, is just where values go. Like pretty much.
I did
like,
that
through and through.
presentation I was talking about for the older guys recently, and in that discussion I was talking about Japanese cars being so desirable. And after the presentation, a guy in his probably 70s came up to me and he's like, "I've got an all original 1984 Supra. Do you think that's worth anything?" And I was like, "Yeah, dude.
Nah, man,
it's
I
all
could-
original.
no,
Yes, it's
no.
not as much as the 90s, but absolutely.
Oh man, it's
some of these people
worthless.
don't-
I'll take it to the junkyard for you for like $40.
yeah, right? But there are those guys out there that don't realize what they have still.
Right.
I really think that those days are not long gone. I think that we're going to see a lot of nice 80s and 90s cars come out of the woodworks where people just don't know what they have.
Yep.
Yep.
Mac, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm pretty much go along with him. I mean, like I said, the Supra is something definitely I've actually been looking at quite a few lately.
Yeah.
But
Do you really feel that the Supra didn't kind of hit its peak with the passing of Paul Walker?
no, I don't think so. It's funny. I mean, it's funny when a manufacturer brings back the name and the actual car itself and what it is. And being a BMW joint venture or
Right.
whatever, people kind of
Which
go
we
back
can
to
talk
those
about
roots.
at another
of,
episode.
I mean,
And the previous generation looks
yeah.
better too. So
Yeah,
I
it
think
stirs
that's
it stirs it up once again, and people's like, oh, maybe I'll just get the previous generation, the one I like.
Right.
Well, I think it was last year at Amelia. They brought in a whole bunch of the young timer cars for the auction, and the Super went for like 190 or something along those lines. It was
it's-
absolutely crazy. But of course, it was like a 3,000 mile, perfectly clean,
Right,
rare
right.
paint kind of example, and all this kind of stuff. So. Who knows if maybe we're saying like, oh, it's at the peak now, and then in 3 years they're like even more, and we're like, oh, why didn't we buy them when they were cheap?
Right.
But you really can't predict that stuff. So
Yeah.
who really knows? You can get an idea. When it comes to like if you had to buy something today, I don't know. I've always loved like the Lotus Elise and all this kind of stuff. You know, everyone always says, "Oh, you can buy one for 30 grand, you can drive it for a few years and sell it for 30 grand," all this kind of stuff. And who knows with the way Lotus is going, if a car like that's ever going to be built again, something that's kind of a raw driver's car that's still somewhat attainable. And in the same way with the Dodge Viper, you can't even build a car nowadays that's road legal that doesn't have any driver's aids. And heck, throwing like a 600 horsepower V10 in there, it's just madness nowadays.
Yeah.
So I think those cars that have then become like. I also kind of want to say things, there's always like the early 2000s cars that, but we're already seeing those explode, like with what Curate is doing. They're getting Enzos, they're getting like Lamborghini Murcielago 6-speeds and all this kind of stuff. But, that's already kind of in the idea. So like if you're thinking of, what's going to be good in the market now, you're like 5 years too late. So going forward, I don't know, and I wouldn't mind having a Spyker in my garage just because it's getting all that hype and no one really knows.
That isn't under 50 grand.
Under 50.
Oh, I forget about that.
The rules, dude.
Yeah. Oh, you get
If
a
you
little.
know of one for 50 grand,
I forgot about the 50 grand rule. My bad. So yeah, at 50 grand, I would probably go with a good Lotus Exige or something along those lines if I could.
Nice.
Because
You're right there at the cusp of 50.
Yeah.
Elise. Let's
Yeah.
go with an Elise.
yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Right,
But
right.
Yeah, Exiges are.
At least an S2. It's got to be an S2.
Yeah.
But yeah, now you can still get an Exige for 50 grand, but you're going to be cutting it.
Yeah.
But that's probably what I would go with, and think like because people are still going to want those. It's just not a go-kart, and it's a lightweight car that's pretty much just for driving. And you're not getting that to go grocery shopping, and although some mad people do, for just in
on
terms
them.
of like driver experience, that's what I want to go with. That's actually what I currently want to buy. So
Cool.
maybe I'll keep my word on it.
I think okay, well, we'll wrap it up here. But the last word, I think the Porsche, the 981 Porsche Cayman. I'm looking at one of those as well, and I think because of the 718 going to the 4-cylinder, and now starting to come back, the GTS, the new GTS is going to have a 6-cylinder. I think they kind of said, okay, we're going to give you 6 cylinders again. I think it's got the best modern touches in the 981. It's got 6 cylinders. I think that's going to hold value, potentially go up a little bit, or at least I hope that I can get one before it does.
Oh, yeah, because I know the S's, I actually looked at those for a while, and I have a friend who's got a first-gen Cayman base, not an S, and he's getting ready to go up. He's getting ready to sell it for a second-gen S. And, yeah, I mean, just finding them for sale right now, I don't think there are that many made to begin with, the S's, but they're just not around.
Yeah, if you know somebody with a 981S, holler at me. I
They're
want it.
such a good car to drive. Like they really are. They hit the mark so well in that. It's wonderful.
Awesome. Well, gentlemen, it's been great. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to come and kind of just talk cars.
Sure.
Make sure that we'll put everybody's social contact info in the descriptions, both on YouTube and everywhere else podcasts can be heard. Thanks again for everybody listening, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks.
Why you ready to rock? Fun that don't ever stop.